Starting in 3, 2, 1. In the year of 1971, when the Indira Gandhi government came to power with the promise of Garibi Hatao, which is to empower the poor people in this Indian nation, but when that very government went on to forcefully sterilize 11 million people under the leadership of Sanjay Gandhi, when that very Indian government of Indira Gandhi went on to demolish 150,000 houses in this very Delhi where we stand here today, at that very point I understand that this very 50 years of emergency have a lot of lessons for Indian democracy. This very 50 years of emergency have a lot of lessons for Indian democracy. And thus I begin my speech here. Greetings, respected distinguished panel of judges. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Respected panel, today when I look into this topic, firstly from a political point of view, every time a person comes to this position of Prime Minister and thinks that he or she is a ruler or owner of this very Indian land, what we understand as a lesson of democracy is number one, the separation of power, that one person, one authority, one executive is not the ultimate ruler of this Indian nation, but rather lies in separation of power between the organs of the government, point number one. And point number two is the urgent need of a strong opposition leader like that of Jayaprakash Nara in 1970s, who stood for check and balances on this very ruler, on this very executive. And panel, when I look into this topic from a constitutional point of view, what emergency told us that this very constitution is flexible. Anyone can come and change it. But what stood as a lesson for democracy is number one, the ability of the constitution to correct itself. Let it be the 44th amendment of the year of 1978, or let it be the restoration of democracy and the restoration of this federal structure in this very Indian land which we saw post this emergency. And panel, when I look into this topic, thirdly, from the angle of law, from the angle of legality, what emergency gave us is the destruction of the constitutional tools like habeas corpus or destruction of the basic doctrine like Kesavanda Bharati case. But what we have as a lesson of democracy is number one, the need of an independent judiciary in India which will keep a check and balance on each and every organ of government. And number two is a need for justices like H.R. Khanna, who stood for judicial courage at the times of independence, at the times of emergency. And panel, when we look into this topic from the angle of international law or global politics, what dented the image of India as world's largest democracy, as world's largest leader of Vishwa Guru of VIKSIT Bharat, at that very point what we see as a lesson of democracy is number one, the institutional vigilance, number two, the fragile nature of democratic institutions in India, and number three is about the reform, the constant reform that we need in democracy of India, which comes the lesson of this emergency. And lastly, panel, to conclude, in the words of the current Home Minister of India, Amit Shah, bad days are to be forgotten. But when those bad days are related to the national and social spirit of this nation, we need to remember them. We need to remember them not for the cause that we need to celebrate them, but we need to remember them every time a government came and tried to impose the rule on the people replied them back. The example is the 1977 elections of India, because this one hand, this one finger, this one vote decides who will remain, who will come, and who will go. Thus is the lesson that we learned as Indian democratic nation from emergency. Thus is the lesson that we learned as a democratic nation from the emergency of 1975. With this, I rest my statements here. Thank you, panel. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.